The sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the small, rundown neighborhood of Roxville. The streets were quiet, with only the occasional sound of a distant dog barking or the hum of a passing car. Eli Johnson, a 15-year-old boy with dark skin and a wiry frame, walked slowly down the cracked sidewalk. His backpack, patched together with duct tape, swung rhythmically against his back. Eli's eyes lingered on the rows of houses, some barely standing, their paint peeling from years of neglect. His own home wasn't much better, a modest, two-room shack where he lived with his mother, Angela Johnson, a waitress who worked double shifts at the local diner. Life in Roxville wasn't kind to people like them, but Angela's unyielding optimism had always been a source of strength for Eli. Tonight, the air was heavy with the scent of burnt wood, a typical smell in a town where residents often used whatever they could find to heat their homes. As Eli rounded the corner of Maple Street, a faint orange glow caught his attention at first. Eli thought it was just the reflection of a streetlight against the trees. But the glow grew brighter, and the faint crackle of flames reached his ears. His heart quickened. A house at the end of the block was on fire, the flames licking hungrily at the wooden structure. "Help! Somebody! Help!" The frantic cries came from an elderly woman standing on the sidewalk, clutching a small dog to her chest. Her voice broke as she pointed toward the burning house. "Walter's still in there. He's in there." Eli froze. He'd heard of Walter Grayson, the reclusive old man who lived alone. Rumors swirled about him being a former millionaire who'd chosen to retire in solitude. The neighbors often joked about his eccentric habits. But tonight, those jokes were far from anyone's mind. People gathered quickly, their faces illuminated by the glow of the fire. Some pulled out their phones to call for help or record videos. But no one moved toward the house. Eli looked around desperately. "Is anyone going in? The fire department's not here yet." No one answered. Fear was etched on their faces. The flames roared louder, and the smoke thickened, billowing out of the windows like a living creature. Eli felt a tug of indecision. His heart screamed for him to act. But his mind reminded him of the danger. A sharp cry from inside the house shattered Eli's hesitation. He dropped his backpack and sprinted toward the flames. "Eli, no!" someone shouted, but he didn't stop. The heat was intense, searing his skin even from several feet away. Eli covered his mouth and nose with his shirt as he approached the front door, which hung loosely on its hinges. The smoke was so thick it stung his eyes, forcing him to squint. "Mr. Grayson," Eli yelled, his voice barely audible over the crackling flames. "Can you hear me?" A weak moan came from the back of the house. Eli pushed forward, navigating the maze of burning furniture and falling debris. Every step felt like a battle against the oppressive heat and the suffocating smoke. His lungs burned, and his vision blurred, but he didn't stop. Finally, he found Walter lying on the floor, his face pale and his breath shallow. "I've got you," Eli said, his voice hoarse. He hooked his arms under Walter's and began dragging him toward the door. It felt like an eternity, each step a monumental effort. Just as Eli thought he couldn't go any farther, the cool night air hit his face. The crowd erupted into cheers as Eli emerged, coughing and gasping. With Walter in tow, two neighbors rushed forward to help pull the elderly man to safety. Eli collapsed onto the grass, his chest heaving as adrenaline coursed through his veins. The fire department arrived minutes later, too late to save the house but just in time to ensure the flames didn't spread. Eli sat on the curb, his clothes singed and his hands trembling. A paramedic checked him over, but Eli waved them off, insisting he was fine. Walter, now conscious, reached for Eli's hand. His voice was weak but filled with gratitude. You saved my life. Son, I'll never forget this." The neighbors surrounded Eli, some clapping him on the back, others murmuring words of admiration. But not everyone was pleased. Sheriff Tom Harlan, a burly man with a permanent scowl, arrived on the scene and eyed Eli with suspicion. "What were you doing inside that house, boy?" Harlan asked, his tone accusatory. "You sure you didn't start that fire yourself?" Eli's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. Angela, who had just arrived, stepped between them, her eyes blazing with anger. "My son just risked his life to save Mr. Grayson. How dare you accuse him of something like that?" The sheriff grunted and walked away, but his words lingered in the air. a bitter reminder of the prejudice that overshadowed Eli's heroic act. The morning after the fire, the news of Eli's heroic rescue had spread throughout Roxville. Some called him a hero, others, however, whispered in corners, questioning his motives. It wasn't long before local reporters descended on the Johnson home. Their modest house, with its peeling paint and sagging porch, became the unlikely center of attention. A young reporter, Samantha Hayes, from the Roxville Gazette, interviewed Eli in front of the house. Her warm demeanor helped him relax, but he stumbled over his words, uncomfortable with the sudden attention. "Eli, what made you run into that fire?" she asked, holding the microphone steady. I didn't think. I just heard him calling for help," Eli said, his voice soft. "I couldn't leave him there." Her article, published later that day, painted Eli as a courageous young man who risked everything to save a life. But the online comments told a different story. "Betty's just trying to get money out of that old man." One comment read, "Typical," wrote another, "acting all noble to cover up what he's really about." Eli read the comments in silence, his chest tightening. Angela noticed his distress and placed a comforting hand on his shoulder. "Don't let them get to you, Eli. You know who you are. And so do the people who matter." Later that week, Walter Grayson insisted on meeting Eli again, this time in his hospital room. Walter was recovering well, though the fire had left him frail. His sharp blue eyes, however, still sparkled with life. "I owe you everything, young man," Walter said, his voice steady despite his condition. "You didn't just save my life. You reminded me that there's still goodness in this world." Eli shifted uncomfortably in his chair, unused to such praise. "I just did what anyone would have done. Not everyone would risk their life the way you did," Walter replied firmly. He leaned forward, his expression serious. "I've lived a long life. And I've built a fortune. I've been looking for a way to give back before my time is up. Meeting you, Eli, feels like fate. I want to help you achieve whatever you dream of." Eli's eyes widened. "Help me? How?" "I'm going to pay for your education," Walter said, smiling. "And not just that, I'll support you in whatever path you choose. You've earned it." Eli didn't know what to say. Gratitude, disbelief, and hope swirled within him. For the first time, he allowed himself to imagine a future that wasn't weighed down by poverty. Walter's generous offer became the talk of the town, sparking mixed reactions. While some celebrated Eli's newfound opportunity, others resented the attention and resources being directed toward him. "Why's he giving all that money to him?" muttered Roy Daniels, a local mechanic, to his friend at the diner. "Plenty of kids in this town could use a hand. Why him?" The whispers turned into rumors. And soon, Eli and Angela found themselves the targets of harassment. Anonymous notes were left on their porch, some calling Eli a fraud, others more explicitly racist. One morning, they awoke to find their front yard vandalized, with spray-painted words reading, "Go back to where you came from." Angela's face tightened with anger as she scrubbed at the graffiti. "I won't let them tear us down," she told Eli, her voice firm. "We've come too far to let hate win." But the pressure weighed heavily on Eli. At school, he overheard classmates mocking him, calling him Walter's charity case. Even teachers seemed to treat him differently, some with pity, others with quiet disdain. The worst came when Sheriff Tom Harlan paid an unexpected visit to their home. He stood on the porch, his large frame blocking the doorway, a sneer etched across his face. "Mind if I ask you a few questions, Ms. Johnson?" he said, tipping his hat. Angela crossed her arms. "What is this about, Sheriff?" "Just following up on a report," he replied, his tone dripping with condescension. "Some folks think it's unusual that a boy like Eli would be so close to Mr. Grayson all of a sudden. Got me wondering if there might be more to the story." Eli, who had been listening from the kitchen, stepped forward. "I didn't do anything wrong," he said, his voice shaking. The sheriff's eyes narrowed. "Didn't say you did, boy, but you know how people talk. Could be you're taking advantage of an old man who's not in his right mind." "That's enough," Angela snapped, her voice trembling with barely contained fury. "My son is a hero. He risked his life to save that man. And you're here accusing him of, what? Exactly?" The sheriff smirked. "Just doing my job, ma'am." He tipped his hat again before walking away, leaving a cloud of suspicion in his wake. The accusations only fueled the town's division. Walter, still recovering, was horrified when he heard about the sheriff's visit. He called a press conference to publicly defend Eli and reaffirm his decision to support him. Eli Johnson is a hero. Plain and simple, Walter declared to the gathered reporters. Anyone who questions that is blind to the truth. But even Walter's words couldn't quell the growing hostility. Sheriff Harlan began quietly investigating Eli and Angela, digging into their past for anything he could use against them. Meanwhile, Walter's decision to back Eli brought old resentments to the surface, particularly among those who felt their town didn't need outside interference from Walter's wealth. The tension reached a boiling point when Angela received a summons to the sheriff's office. "You're being accused of fraud," Harlan informed her smugly. "Might want to lawyer up." Eli sat nervously in the cramped living room of the Johnson home, his fingers fidgeting with the hem of his worn t-shirt. Walter Grayson had requested a private meeting with him and Angela. The elderly man, still recovering from the fire, arrived with his lawyer, Charles Bennett, a sharp-eyed man in his late 40s. Angela served coffee, though her hands trembled as she set the cups down. "Mr. Grayson, is everything okay?" she asked, her voice tinged with concern. Walter smiled gently. "Angela, Eli, there's something I need to share with you both. Something I haven't told anyone in this town." He leaned back in his chair, his gaze distant. "Before I retired to Roxville, I built one of the largest real estate empires in the Midwest. I had money, power, influence, but I also had regrets. I lost my family because I let ambition blind me. I came here to find peace and purpose." Eli exchanged a glance with his mother, unsure of where the conversation was heading. Walter's expression turned solemn. "After what you did for me, Eli, I realized something. I've spent too long hiding from the world. You showed me what true courage looks like, and it's inspired me to do something meaningful with what I have left." Walter reached into his jacket and pulled out a neatly folded document. "I'm establishing the Eli Johnson Foundation, a scholarship program to support young people like you who have the potential to achieve greatness but lack the means. And, Eli, you'll be the first beneficiary." The room fell silent as the weight of Walter's words sank in. Angela's eyes filled with tears. "Mr. Grayson, I don't even know what to say." "You don't have to say anything," Walter replied warmly. "This is my way of repaying the debt I owe your son, and of making sure no one can question his motives again." Eli's heart raced. The offer was overwhelming. For the first time, he dared to imagine a future where college wasn't just a distant dream. But doubt crept in. "What if people think I'm just taking advantage of you?" he asked hesitantly. Walter's gaze hardened. "Let them talk. Their opinions don't matter. What matters is what you do with this opportunity." Charles Bennett chimed in, his tone professional but kind. "The foundation will also include legal protections for you and your family. Eli, Sheriff Harlan and his accusations won't stand a chance once we're through with him." News of the foundation spread quickly. And while many celebrated Walter's generosity, others reacted with hostility. At the local diner, Roy Daniels and a group of his friends gathered to vent their frustrations. "Grayson's gone senile," Roy muttered, slamming his coffee cup down. "Giving all that money to that kid? It's a slap in the face to the rest of us who've lived here our whole lives." His friend Earl, a wiry man with a permanent scowl, nodded. "Bet that boy's laughing all the way to the bank." The resentment wasn't confined to whispers anymore. Eli became the target of open hostility at school, with classmates taunting him and teachers ignoring him. One afternoon, someone scrawled, "Fraud," in large red letters across his locker. Angela, too, felt the strain. Customers at the diner stopped leaving tips, and her boss, bowing to pressure from the community, reduced her hours. It felt as though the entire town had turned against them. Meanwhile, Sheriff Harlan wasn't about to let the situation rest. He saw Walter's support of Eli as a direct challenge to his authority. Behind closed doors, he orchestrated a plan to discredit the Johnson family. "I need you to dig up everything you can on them," Harlan instructed his deputy, Frank Warner. "Old debts, complaints, anything that'll stick. We'll show this town what kind of people they really are." Frank hesitated. "Sheriff, don't you think this is going a bit far?" The boy saved a life. After all, Harlan's expression darkened. "You questioning me, Warner? I'm keeping this town safe. And that means keeping people like the Johnsons in their place." Frank nodded reluctantly but couldn't shake the feeling that Harlan's actions were less about justice and more about prejudice. Eli, despite the mounting pressure, refused to let the hate break him. With Walter's encouragement, he began attending speaking events organized by the foundation, sharing his story and advocating for underprivileged youth. His natural shyness faded as he discovered a voice he hadn't known he possessed. At one event, Eli met Lila Carter, a college student and activist who immediately took an interest in his story. "You're braver than most people twice your age," she told him. "Don't let this town's ignorance hold you back." Her words stuck with Eli, fueling his determination to rise above the negativity. With Lila's guidance, he began preparing for the SATs and exploring scholarship opportunities beyond Walter's foundation. Sheriff Harlan's vendetta reached its peak when he arrested Angela on fabricated charges of fraud and theft, claiming she had manipulated Walter into giving them money. The arrest sent shockwaves through the community, dividing it further. Eli was devastated but refused to let the injustice stand. "We're not giving up, Mom," he told Angela during a tense visit to the county jail. "I'll fight this with everything I've got." Walter, furious at Harlan's actions, vowed to use his resources to expose the sheriff's corruption. "This isn't just about clearing your name, Eli," he said. "It's about standing up to people who abuse their power." The arrest of Angela Johnson created ripples far beyond Roxville. Walter Grayson, leveraging his network of contacts, reached out to Monica Reynolds, a high-profile civil rights attorney known for taking on cases involving systemic racism and corruption. Monica, a sharp and tenacious black woman in her late 30s, arrived in Roxville with a clear purpose. "I've reviewed the charges," she told Walter and Eli during their first meeting. "They're flimsy at best. Sheriff Harlan is grasping at straws. But we're going to make him regret ever targeting your family." Monica wasn't the only ally Eli gained during this time. Frank Warner, Harlan's deputy, began to wrestle with his conscience. Over the years, he'd witnessed Harlan's abuse of power but had stayed silent out of fear. Seeing Angela, a hard-working single mother, behind bars was the final straw. Frank visited Monica's temporary office late one evening. "I've got information," he said, his voice low, "about Harlan, records, complaints, even bribes he's taken over the years. If you can protect me, I'll testify." Monica's eyes narrowed. This could change everything. While Monica worked on Angela's case, Eli channeled his growing frustration into action. Lila Carter encouraged him to speak at a youth activism event in the neighboring city of Stanton. The idea terrified him, but she insisted. "This isn't just about your mom, Eli," Lila said. "It's about every kid who's been underestimated. Every family who's been mistreated because of the color of their skin. Your story can inspire them." On the day of the event, Eli stood nervously backstage, gripping the edges of the podium with sweaty hands. But as he stepped out and saw the crowd, hundreds of young faces looking up at him with hope, something inside him shifted. "My name is Eli Johnson," he began, his voice steady. "I'm just a kid from Roxville. But this past month, I've learned that being just a kid doesn't mean I'm powerless. I've learned that courage isn't about never being scared, it's about standing up even when you are." The audience erupted into applause. For the first time, Eli felt the weight of his story transforming into a powerful tool for change. Meanwhile, Walter Grayson worked behind the scenes to weaken Harlan's grip on the town. He began funding local organizations that promoted racial equality and justice, empowering community leaders who had long been silenced by fear. Walter also hired a private investigator, David Shaw, to dig deeper into Harlan's past. What they uncovered was damning evidence of extortion, racial profiling, and the systematic targeting of minority families. "We'll use this in court," Monica said, reviewing the files. "But we need something stronger, a public reckoning that forces Harlan into the spotlight." Walter nodded. "Leave that to me, Harlan." Sensing the walls closing in, doubled down on his efforts to discredit the Johnson family. He began spreading rumors that Walter had been manipulated by Angela and Eli, painting them as con artists who preyed on the elderly. His allies in the town eagerly spread the lies. The tension reached a breaking point when a small protest organized by Eli and Lila turned violent. As the group marched through Roxville, demanding Angela's release, a group of Harlan's supporters confronted them. Insults were hurled, followed by bottles and rocks. Eli stood his ground, even as chaos erupted around him. "This is what they want," he shouted to the crowd. "Don't give them the satisfaction." The confrontation made headlines, and Eli's calm, resolute leadership drew national attention. Prominent activists and public figures began to rally behind the Johnson family's cause, turning Roxville into a battleground for a much larger fight. As the court date for Angela's case approached, Monica received a surprise visit from an unexpected ally, Martha Harlan, the sheriff's estranged sister. Martha, a quiet woman in her 50s, had left Roxville years ago to escape her brother's influence. But she'd been following the news and felt compelled to speak out. "My brother's been a bully his whole life," Martha admitted, her voice trembling. "But it's more than that. He's hiding something big." Martha provided Monica with a copy of an old diary belonging to their late father, who had been the sheriff before Harlan. The diary detailed a long history of corruption, including land deals and payoffs that had allowed the Harlan family to maintain power for decades. It also revealed a shocking secret. Sheriff Harlan had personally set fire to properties owned by black families in the 1980s, ensuring they would leave town. Monica's hands trembled as she read the entries. This changes everything." Despite the mounting tension, Eli's confidence continued to grow. He became a symbol of resilience, using his newfound platform to advocate for justice. His transformation from a shy, uncertain teenager into a determined young leader inspired not only his community but people across the country. One evening, Walter took Eli aside. "You remind me of myself when I was your age," he said, "but you have something I never did: integrity. Whatever happens in court, you've already won." Eli nodded, his jaw set with determination. "Thank you for believing in me. I won't let you down." The Johnsons' case against Sheriff Harlan became a symbol of resistance against systemic racism and abuse of power. As the trial date approached, Monica Reynolds worked tirelessly, combing through evidence and building a case that could not only clear Angela's name but expose Harlan's corruption. Eli sat in Monica's office one evening, flipping through a binder of legal documents. "Do you really think we can win?" he asked, his voice heavy with doubt. Monica leaned back in her chair, her sharp eyes softened by empathy. "It's not just about winning, Eli. It's about showing the truth. And with the evidence we have, and the people willing to stand by your family, we have a real chance." Among those people was Frank Warner, the deputy who had turned against Harlan. His testimony, combined with Martha Harlan's revelations and Walter Grayson's unyielding support, formed the backbone of Monica's strategy. But she knew the fight wouldn't be easy. Harlan still had influence in the town, and his supporters were vocal and dangerous. The courthouse was packed on the day of the first hearing. Supporters of the Johnson family and Harlan's loyalists filled the pews, their tension palpable. Eli sat next to Angela, holding her hand tightly as Monica presented their case. Monica's opening argument was concise and powerful. She laid out the timeline of Harlan's actions, emphasizing the lack of evidence supporting the fraud charges and pointing to a pattern of racial discrimination in his dealings with minority families. Harlan's lawyer, a shrewd man named Gordon Reese, countered with a narrative designed to cast doubt on the Johnsons' integrity. He painted Angela as an opportunist and Eli as a manipulative teenager who had used the fire rescue to gain Walter Grayson's favor. Eli clenched his fists as he listened, but Monica placed a calming hand on his shoulder. "Stay strong," she whispered. "The truth will prevail." Over the course of several days, witnesses were called to the stand. Walter Grayson was among the first, and his testimony was a powerful rebuttal to the accusations against the Johnsons. "I owe my life to Eli Johnson," Walter said firmly. "The idea that he or his mother would exploit me is not only absurd, it's insulting. Sheriff Harlan's actions are a disgrace to this town." Frank Warner followed, his voice trembling as he recounted years of working under Harlan. "I stayed silent for too long," he admitted, "but I can't stand by anymore. Harlan has used his position to target and intimidate people, especially those who can't fight back." When Monica presented the diary entries from Harlan's father, the courtroom fell silent. The revelations about the Harlan family's history of racism and corruption sent shockwaves through the town. Harlan's face darkened, but he said nothing, his jaw set in anger despite the damning evidence. Gordon Reese mounted an aggressive defense. He questioned the credibility of every witness, implying that Frank Warner had a vendetta. Martha Harlan was bitter, and Walter Grayson was being manipulated. When Eli took the stand, Reese pounced. "You've become quite the public figure, haven't you, Eli?" he asked, his tone dripping with sarcasm. "Enjoying the attention, are we?" Eli met his gaze steadily. "I didn't ask for any of this," he said. "I just did what I thought was right. And yet you've been traveling, speaking at events, building a name for yourself. Isn't that convenient?" Eli's voice remained calm. "If sharing my story helps other people stand up for themselves, then I'm proud of that." As the trial neared its conclusion, Monica introduced a surprise witness, Rachel Carter, a former accountant who had worked for the Harlan family years ago. Rachel revealed records of illegal transactions, including bribes and fraudulent land deals orchestrated by Harlan. "This proves a pattern of corruption," Monica argued. "Harlan's charges against the Johnsons aren't about justice, they're about silencing anyone who challenges his authority." The final blow came when Monica played a secretly recorded conversation between Harlan and one of his allies. In the recording, Harlan admitted to fabricating evidence against Angela to send a message to the town. The courtroom erupted. Harlan's supporters shouted in disbelief, while the Johnson family's advocates cheered. After days of deliberation, the jury returned with their decision. Angela Johnson was found not guilty on all charges, and the court recommended an independent investigation into Harlan's actions as sheriff. Eli hugged his mother tightly, tears streaming down his face. Walter patted him on the back, his eyes shining with pride. "You did it, son," he said. "You stood tall when it mattered most." As the courtroom emptied, Harlan was led away in handcuffs, his once imposing figure now a shadow of itself. Eli watched him go, feeling a mix of relief and sorrow. "I don't hate him," Eli said quietly. "I just hope he learns from this." Sheriff Harlan's arrest sent shockwaves through Roxville. The community, once divided by loyalty and prejudice, began to question the man they had trusted for years. Local news outlets covered the story extensively, painting a picture of a town grappling with its past and present. Eli, now more confident than ever, found himself at the center of a growing movement. His story had inspired others to come forward with their own experiences of injustice, and activists from across the state rallied behind him. But the battle wasn't over. Harlan's supporters, though diminished, still sought to undermine the Johnson family's victory. Anonymous threats arrived at their doorstep, and rumors spread that Harlan's legal team was preparing an appeal. Monica Reynolds, however, was undeterred. "Let them try," she told Eli and Angela during a meeting at their home. "We've already exposed the truth. They can't undo that." Behind bars, Harlan seethed with anger and humiliation. His lawyer, Gordon Reese, visited him in the county jail to discuss their options. "We can push for an appeal," Reese said, flipping through a stack of documents. "But the evidence against you is overwhelming. It won't be easy." Harlan slammed his fist on the table. "I don't care how hard it is. I'm not going down without a fight. Find something, anything, we can use against that boy or his mother." Reese hesitated. "Harlan, this isn't just about them anymore. You've got the entire community against you. Not to mention the media. Maybe it's time to cut your losses." Harlan's glare was ice cold. "I've spent my life keeping this town in order. I won't let some kid and a washed-up lawyer ruin everything." As the appeal loomed, the Johnson family's story gained national attention. Eli was invited to speak on a popular news program, where he shared his journey with millions of viewers. "What would you say to Sheriff Harlan if you had the chance?" the host asked. Eli paused, choosing his words carefully. "I'd tell him that hate only divides us. And justice isn't about power, it's about doing what's right. I don't hate him, I just want him to understand the damage he's caused." The interview went viral, further solidifying Eli's role as a symbol of resilience and justice. But with the increased attention came new challenges. Online trolls began attacking Eli and his family, spreading misinformation and hateful rhetoric. Angela, ever the pillar of strength, reminded Eli to focus on the positive. "We've come this far because we stayed true to ourselves," she said. "Don't let anyone take that away from you." The appeal trial began with much fanfare, drawing even larger crowds and media coverage than the original case. Monica, as sharp as ever, built her argument on the foundation of truth and evidence, while Reese attempted to poke holes in the Johnson story. One of Reese's key tactics was to discredit Frank Warner, whose testimony had been crucial in the original trial. Isn't it true, Reese asked, that you only came forward after being passed over for a promotion? Frank's response was steady and clear. I came forward because it was the right thing to do. Sheriff Harlan's corruption has hurt too many people. And I couldn't stay silent any longer. The courtroom buzzed with tension as Reese shifted his focus to Walter Grayson. Mr. Grayson, you're an elderly man recovering from a traumatic event. Is it possible that your judgment has been clouded by emotion? Walter's reply was swift. My judgment is clearer than it's ever been. Eli Johnson is a hero. And the real question is why people like you and Harlan are so determined to tear him down. Midway through the appeal, Monica introduced a piece of evidence that had been uncovered by David Shaw, the private investigator. It was a recording of a phone call between Harlan and one of his allies, made shortly before Angela's arrest. In the recording, Harlan's voice was unmistakable. I don't care if she's innocent. I'll make sure she pays. We have to send a message. People like her don't belong in this town. The courtroom erupted. Harlan's supporters, already shaken by the initial trial, began to distance themselves from him. The judge called for order, his gavel striking like thunder. Ms. Reynolds, the judge said, this evidence is damning. Proceed. Monica stood tall, her voice ringing with conviction. This recording proves beyond a doubt that Sheriff Harlan's actions were motivated by prejudice, not justice. His appeal is not only baseless, it's a desperate attempt to cling to power. After days of testimony and deliberation, the appeal jury returned with their decision. Harlan's appeal was denied, and the court upheld the original verdict. Furthermore, the judge recommended additional charges against Harlan for abuse of power and obstruction of justice. Eli and Angela embraced as tears streamed down their faces. The courtroom erupted in applause, a stark contrast to the tension that had filled it just days earlier. Walter Grayson, sitting in the front row, gave Eli a proud nod. Outside the courthouse, Eli addressed the crowd of supporters and reporters. This isn't just a victory for my family, it's a victory for everyone who's ever been silenced or treated unfairly. Change is possible when we stand together. With the legal battles behind them, the Johnson family began to rebuild their lives. Walter's foundation flourished, providing scholarships and resources to underprivileged youth across the state. Eli, now a confident young man, became a spokesperson for the foundation, traveling to schools and community centers to inspire others. Sheriff Harlan, stripped of his power and facing a lengthy prison sentence, became a cautionary tale for those who abused their authority. Roxville, once a town divided, slowly began to heal as its residents confronted the prejudice that had long festered beneath the surface. Eli's journey from a shy, uncertain teenager to a leader and advocate was far from over. But as he stood on the stage at his high school graduation, delivering a speech that brought the audience to their feet, he knew one thing for certain. The fire that had once threatened to destroy everything had instead ignited a spark of change months after the final verdict. Eli Johnson found himself standing before a packed auditorium at Roxville High School. The school had invited him to deliver a keynote address for its annual awards ceremony, a first for someone his age. As Eli took the stage, the crowd erupted in applause. His once timid demeanor had given way to confidence, and his voice carried the strength of someone who had faced adversity and emerged victorious. When I ran into that burning house, Eli began, I wasn't thinking about being a hero. I wasn't thinking about recognition or rewards. I was thinking about doing the right thing. And that's a lesson I hope we all carry with us, doing what's right. Even when it's hard, even when it's scary. The room was silent, captivated by his words. But I didn't get here alone, he continued. My mom taught me the value of hard work and kindness. Mr. Grayson showed me what it means to believe in someone. And so many of you in this community stood up for my family when it mattered most. This victory isn't just mine, it's ours. Walter Grayson's Eli Johnson Foundation grew rapidly, attracting donations from philanthropists and corporations inspired by Eli's story. The foundation provided scholarships, mentorship programs, and community-building initiatives across the state, creating opportunities for young people who had once been overlooked. Eli became deeply involved, traveling to schools and community centers to share his story. In one visit to a struggling high school in Stanton, he met a group of students who reminded him of himself, full of potential but weighed down by doubt and circumstances. Don't let anyone tell you what you can or can't do. He told them, your future isn't written yet. You have the power to change your story. One student, Marcus Taylor, later reached out to Eli, thanking him for his words. You gave me hope, Marcus wrote in an email. For the first time, I feel like my dreams are possible. Roxville began to heal in the wake of Harlan's downfall. New leadership in the sheriff's department prioritized transparency and fairness. And community forums encouraged open dialogue about racism and inequality. Angela Johnson returned to her job at the diner but found her role had changed. Customers who had once ignored her now went out of their way to greet her warmly. And her boss, recognizing her resilience, promoted her to manager. At a town hall meeting, Angela spoke about her family's journey. We've faced hate, fear, and injustice, she said, but we've also seen the power of unity and kindness. This town has the chance to move forward, not by forgetting the past, but by learning from it. One day, Eli received a letter from Martha Harlan, Sheriff Harlan's sister. She wrote of her decision to move back to Roxville and help rebuild the community. My brother's actions were unforgivable, she admitted, but I believe this town can become better than what he made it. Eli invited Martha to speak at a foundation event, where she shared her story and urged others to confront their biases. Her speech was met with cautious acceptance, a sign that change, while slow, was possible as Eli prepared to leave for college on a scholarship funded by the foundation. He felt a mix of excitement and apprehension. His experiences had shaped him, but the world beyond Roxville presented new challenges. Walter, now frail but still sharp, called Eli to his home for one final conversation. The road ahead won't be easy, Walter said, his voice soft but firm. But I've seen what you're capable of. You're going to make a difference. Eli, never doubt that. Eli smiled, tears glistening in his eyes. Thank you for everything, Mr. Grayson. I'll make you proud. Eli's first year at college was both thrilling and challenging. He excelled academically, majoring in social justice and public policy, and became a leader on campus. His story continued to inspire others, and he began laying the groundwork for a career that would allow him to fight for equality on a larger scale. Back in Roxville, the foundation thrived, with Angela taking a more active role in its management. Marcus Taylor, the student Eli had inspired, became one of the first recipients of a full scholarship, setting his own path toward success. Years later, Eli returned to Roxville for the dedication of a new community center funded by the foundation. The center, named the Eli Johnson Center for Justice and Education, stood as a symbol of resilience and hope. As Eli cut the ribbon, surrounded by friends, family, and supporters, he reflected on how far he had come. The fire that had once threatened to consume his life had instead ignited a movement that transformed not only his community but countless lives beyond it. Eli stood before a crowd of young students at the community center, his voice steady and strong. You don't have to be a superhero to make a difference, he told them. Sometimes, all it takes is one brave decision. And when you make that choice, you might just change the world. As the students cheered, Eli looked out at the faces before him and smiled. He knew his journey was far from over, but he was ready for whatever lay ahead.